Today I'm getting a 3D body scan to see if I can make any marginal gains with my body to improve my performance as a motorbike racer. I'm just on the way to my local gym, Bluestone Fitness. Bluestone is run by a friend I went to school with, Danny Ball, and he's got an exciting new company he's launched called Mondays, and basically I'm hoping it's going to give me a slight advantage against my competition this year, and Danny's kindly let me use his facilities for free to try and give me the upper hand on everyone. The coolest thing about his new project is he's got a 3D body scanner. So I'm going to stand on the scanner and he's basically going to analyse my body in a 3D format and see if there's any differences between my muscle groups on either side of my body. I've obviously had a few injuries over the years and I can use all of this information to try and improve my body. Here's my camera then.
Why tensing?
Why? I shouldn't have brought you here. I don't know why I brought you first.
That's it, that's the one. A bit further. That's it, mate.
I'm hoping my arms are slightly smaller because I think did loads of weights, well not loads of weights, but my arms got bigger over winter and I think I might have that operation. So I've tried to calm down a little. So I'm back from having the scans and it's time to analyse the results. Now I had the first scan on the 23rd of April and then 2 months later I went back for another scan in June. Now although it's really interesting looking at these numbers and it gives you so many different reference points and numbers that it spits out from all over your body, it's kind of only relevant to me because it's one machine that I've had a test on, and unless you go and stand on the same machine at the same time, it's kind of difficult to compare results. So I'm not going to get too hung up on all the numbers, but what it does produce is a really good reference point because it's the same machine for me and it's the same test that I've done twice, so I can compare the first set of numbers to the second and see if there's any differences in my body. There's three main things I wanted to look at with this scan, and the first thing was my body fat score. Now we're motorbike racers at the end of the day, and although it's important to have a low body fat score, it's also important to make sure you're strong and that you've got enough fat in your body that you can sustain a full race or a full race weekend. So although it's important to be lean, we're not racing in an ultra marathon, and it's not all about getting rid of every single bit of fat off your body and being super lean. It's important to have some amount of fat in your body to keep your body functioning properly, and we have lots of races back to back. We have long weekends where we're racing or practicing and qualifying and racing, so you've got to have some amount of fat in your body to try and keep yourself healthy and so that you can function properly during the year. Now that being said, although it's important to have some amount of fat in your body, it's also important to be as lean as possible and carrying the minimum around with you. So with my training I always try and look at minimising the amount of body fat and increasing the amount of muscle that I've got, and just being a general all-round good athlete. So I was going to look at this body fat score because my training was getting really intense and I was hoping that I would bring my body fat score down slightly. The second important factor for me was my leg measurements. Many of you will know that last year I broke my right leg and I tore my right MCL ligament in my knee. So I pretty much had 9 months off training my right leg properly. I couldn't squat, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't bend my leg properly. And when I'd finally got an operation on this leg, it was a lot skinnier than my left leg. Annoyingly, Danny didn't have this machine then, as it would have been really interesting to do it then and now. But I have been trying to strengthen this leg and get it somewhere closer to my left leg, as my left leg is still slightly bigger even though I'm 9 months on, so I want to try and get this leg as strong as I can and match my left leg as closely as I can. And then the third thing that cropped up was a complete fluke really. I just happened to have this scan in April, and then not long after that I started getting arm pump really bad, and if you've watched my video from a couple of weeks ago, I had an arm pump operation, and I'm just quite intrigued to see if that operation makes any difference in the size of my forearm, so I can compare before and after and see if having a mechanical release of your arm where they basically go in and cut the fascia open in your arm to sort of relieve the pressure in your forearm. I'm just interested to see if that makes a difference and if it affects the size of your arm at all. So they're the three things I'm going to dive into, and I'll go through these results now that I've got on the screen. So the first thing is my body fat. I do a lot of cardiovascular training. I get asked a lot on this channel to make a training video, and I have to try and keep some things secret as I want to have some kind of advantage over my competition. But basically I do a lot of cycling. That's where most of my training is done. I injured my right leg last year, so I had to do all of it on a bicycle basically. I couldn't run anymore. I used to really enjoy running, I used to do a lot of running, but basically cycling is where I do all my cardiovascular training now. So I work really closely with Loughborough University. I do lots of testing there, which I've already shown you on this channel before. And I also work really closely with Danny's staff at Mondays, and they've got some really good staff there that are really switched on and keep me on the right track. Basically my cardiovascular training started back in November, and it's a really slow build over the winter, and gradually you increase in intensity leading up to the season, so you're in peak performance by the time the season comes around. So the first interesting thing for me to see is that my training was paying off effectively. My body fat on this test went from 5% in the first test in April down to 4% in the second test. Some of you will have heard of body fat percentages before, and this is different to a skin fold test, which is sort of the classic body fat test, but I think 4% would say there's probably not a lot left on there to lose. So I'm really happy with that. My training's paid off. I've worked really hard this winter. I don't show much of my training that I do on this channel, but behind the scenes I have been working really hard, and I've sort of got a new motivation inside me, and I'm giving it everything I've got. So I'm pleased to say that my body fat is at that percentage, and I haven't left anything on the table when it comes to my training. So the second thing to look at is my right leg, and obviously I'm trying to get this leg to be as close to my left leg as possible. It may be that it doesn't end up being exactly the same over time just because this one has had an injury, but I'm trying to do everything I can to make it as close to my left leg as I can. So in the first test, my lower right thigh measured 37.1 centimetres, so that was kind of a good benchmark for us to go from. Danny's got some really good staff at Mondays, and they gave me a personalised strength programme for my right leg to try and make it match my left leg. So that involved doing lots of single leg exercises, whether that be squats or single leg workouts on machines, and that was coupled with lots of other leg exercises, just your normal leg exercises that you expect someone to do, whether that be squats, lunges, all things like that, basically to try and just improve my legs and make them stronger. What was quite interesting, after doing my training on my right leg, it's gone up by 0.6 of a centimetre, which is great, but my left leg has also gone up as well. As I'm training both my legs, my left leg has also got bigger. So the important thing is my right leg has got bigger and effectively stronger, and it is starting to feel a whole lot better. I'm sort of after those last little incremental gains now with my leg to try and get it to 100%, and I'm really chuffed that all of that's working. So I'm going to carry on doing that programme, and hopefully in another 6 weeks it will pretty much be there with my left leg. What was funny was my left leg wasn't the one I was working on, but I've managed to grow that 2 centimetres. So I think what might be happening is, as I'm training my right leg, I'm doing single leg exercises on that. I'm still doing leg exercises in general, and I'm still cycling a lot. So I'm still training my left leg, and I think because my left leg sometimes compensates for my right leg as it's not quite as strong, I end up using that one more in exercises where I'm using both my legs. So that one has actually grown more than my right leg. So I've got more catching up to do with my right leg now. Now the last thing I wanted to compare was my right forearm. As some of you will have seen, I've got these fabulous new scars on my arm now, front and back. If you haven't watched that video on my arm pump, you can go and have a look at exactly what went on in that operation. So I was really intrigued to see if I could actually see anything from this scan after my operation. One thing to note is when I first did this scan, I hadn't really been riding much. It was back in April when tracks were still closed, and I hadn't done much testing. So since then I've actually done quite a lot of riding, which will obviously affect the way my muscle groups are now working. Some muscles may get bigger and some may get smaller as I sort of get bike fit and accustomed to riding motorbikes again. So interestingly, my left forearm is 0.6 of a centimetre bigger than it was before I started riding motorbikes. So you can see the effect that motorbike riding has on your forearm. So obviously I'm using my forearms in unison riding a motorbike. They're both holding the handlebars the same. What's fascinating is since I've had the operation on this arm, my right forearm is actually 2 centimetres bigger than it was previous to the operation. So I think you can see when he cuts that forearm and the sac releases what's inside it and the muscle kind of expands, how much pressure that has relieved. That's 2 centimetres bigger, which I think is bizarre. I knew it had an effect, and I knew pretty much straight away once I had the operation the difference it had made to my forearm, but I didn't quite imagine it to be 2 centimetres different. So I've basically got 2 centimetres more room inside my forearm for the muscle to move inside, which I think proves that the operation is kind of the only way to go when you get to that point where you can't use your arm anymore.
I just want to say a huge thank you to Danny, who let me use all of his facilities for free. He didn't want to plug out of this. This was just him being a good friend and letting me use his facilities. So if you do want to check him out, I would really appreciate it. Show him some love, because I think what he's got there is truly fascinating. If you did find this interesting, I guess I could do it 6 months into the season and see if there's any more changes to my body, as I didn't expect there to be so much of a difference in 6 weeks. And I'm really pleased to know that all my training has been paying off and I'm in good shape for the season ahead. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next week in the next video.